Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Daesun Yim with us. Daesun, thanks for coming on the program.
Yeah, no worries, man. Great to be here.
We're glad to have you because you have the best mustache of anyone that's ever been on the program.
Well, thank you very much.
That is a beautiful stash. But we're also excited to have you because you're the lead growth engineer for Robinhood.io, a new product that is very exciting. What's that?
.com now.
Ah, you got the .com.
Got the domain. Yeah, we got the domain.
Can I ask how much you paid for it?
Not that much, actually. The guy who owned the domain is a wonderful guy, and it turns out that, he'd been sitting on the domain for a while, and a lot of people had offered to buy it, and he always felt like, he didn't feel like it was going to like a worthwhile cause. Mm-hmm. But then he checked out what we were doing, and he really liked it. So, he offered to sell it to us for significantly less than we were expecting to pay.
That's awesome. So it used to be Robinhood.io, now Robinhood.com, which is an incredible domain name. So tell us a little bit about Robinhood. As soon as I saw it, I was interested. It has such it's a great idea. So what is Robinhood?
Well, plain and simple, 6 words or fewer. It's a zero commission brokerage, right? Okay. So you buy and sell stocks, and normal brokerages make you pay $7 to $10 in commissions, but we charge no commissions. Yeah.
So who's the market for this? Does this mean that people that maybe don't have the money to trade at a high level, or they want to make more micro trades? Who's the market for this, or just anybody that makes trades, really, I guess?
Well, so for starters, anybody who makes trades I personally believe that it's a compelling product for anybody who trades. Mm-hmm. But I also believe that one of the more interesting aspects is we can significantly lower the barriers to entry for trading. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, you take the market of people who want to pay $7 to $10 per trade, and you can make you can reach such a wider audience by taking away that one bottleneck, that one barrier to entry. Yeah. And there are many secondary, barriers to entry that you can remove as well, making the sign-up process easier. For instance, to essentially say, hey, maybe a trading platform wasn't right for you in 2013, but that in the future, maybe Robinhood is the way to go.
Yeah, that idea of taking away friction. I haven't used the product yet, but looking at the website, it seems like you have taken away a lot of friction. You have screenshots on there of the app. It doesn't look like a stock trading app. It doesn't look that intimidating. It looks like a modern, productivity app or something, the way it's designed and kind of the way it feels. So I do think you've taken away some of the friction there. But now here's the obvious question that I have.
Right.
How do you make money when you got $0 transaction fees? I mean, are you guys upselling people to something else in some way?
Well, it's the brokerage. It's sort of like an iceberg, right? Where you, as a consumer, you only really see one way that the brokerage makes money, which is through commissions, right? But below the surface of the water, brokerages make money in other ways, by providing value to various financial institutions. So we believe that, in the future, us as Robinhood, we can provide several services, such as, say, providing liquidity, right, to exchanges in exchange for money is, for instance, one way of making money that doesn't require, charging customers commissions. And this works better now than it did, say 10, 20 years ago, because the unit economics now work out. Right? There have been lots of advances in trading technology that have gradually been decreasing, have been pushing down the price that a brokerage is required to pay, right, to execute an individual trade. I guarantee you that right now, your average brokerage is paying less per trade than your average brokerage was paying to execute a trade in 1975.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So the unit economics are now beginning to play out. And then from a marketing perspective, right, nowadays there are a lot of multipliers that you can take advantage of in a growth position that simply weren't available, before the advent of, say, social media, before the advent of, mobile.
Yeah. I love one of the insights there is that, what you guys are promoting, I ask you what is Robinhood, and the answer is, it's $0 trading. That's what Robinhood is. But that's not how you're making your money. And so I think that's an important lesson for people watching this or listening to this is that what you market and how you monetize may not be the same thing. And if you market what you monetize, it might turn off people. So there's a way to present your offering in a way that actually allows you to, in a sense, grow. And I think that's just an important lesson for people to kind of realize. I think about Google, and they have their Android phones for almost free. That's because they don't care about making money on Android phones. They make money off the ads they show on the phones. And so their whole economical universe is just different. And I think that's something for entrepreneurs to kind of really get their head around. Now, you guys just recently passed a big threshold, right? You made your first trade using the app, I think.
Well, so we made our first, there's a little distinction that I'd like to make, and we made our first internal trade.
Okay.
So what that means is we have all these back-end systems set up, and we sent the first trade, we routed our first trade through our internal systems, and then hit, our clearing firm, and then purchased and sold, a security through that.
Nice. How much work goes into getting to that moment? Is that just months and months of work to make that happen?
Years and years. It takes a highly non-trivial amount of time to actually receive the license to be allowed to make those trades.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that's a big competitive advantage, that you know how much work it took to get here, and for someone else to cross that chasm would just be extreme?
It's a phenomenal amount of effort that goes into doing this, and I think that one thing that sort of like a blessing in disguise of that is that once you cross that chasm, right, that's already a fairly risky thing. Mm-hmm. So to innovate on top of that is oftentimes an unpalatable amount of risk.
Yeah.
Right? It's a lot of risk, just to go about doing this, and then to take a less conservative path, right, in terms of strategy, in terms of just the way you build a brokerage. Mm-hmm. That's, in many ways, that's more risk than a lot of people are willing to take. And we believe that there are many, rewards to be, had by exploring these pathways.
Yeah, no, I think that's another great insight. Just the amount of hard work and the amount of hard things you have to do to get to the point you're at is your competitive advantage in a sense. So don't always be afraid of hard things. Sometimes hard things is the reason you won't have competition in the same amount later on down the road. Now, you guys have had a staggering number of signups on your early access program. What's the total up to now? How many early access signups do you have?
I checked last night, and it was around 283,000.
Right, 283,000 emails on file of people that want access to this app to do trading.
Yes.
All right, now how long did it take to get that number? How long have they been able to give you their email address?
About 3 months. About 3 months.
So okay, we'll make the numbers simpler here. Almost 300,000 in about 3 months. So you get about 100,000 signups a month, roughly. Is that comparable to what you guys expected, or is that just way exceed what you were really intending?
Well, the holy grail, right, is like 10% week over week. Uh-huh. And we've been tracking fairly close to 10% week over week over the course of 2014 so far. I think last we measured it was 13%. So it's slightly more than than any reasonable person might expect.
Yeah.
But then again, it's this isn't exactly right. This is it's a lot of hard work that went into it. So
yeah, absolutely.
We're very happy with the way that the waitlist has and is continuing to turn out.
Yeah, and we call it a waitlist because the app is not public for everyone yet, right? It's still private, and you're going to start rolling in a few people at a time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it's needless to say, the direction this interview is going in is, how did you get almost 300,000 signups in 3 months? Everything from now on in the rest of this interview is going to dig into that, and we're going to come at it from different angles. I'm going to ask you different questions, and I want to try to figure out, what is it that made this thing such a juggernaut in such a short amount of time? And I think I have some hunches on what mattered and what didn't, but I'm going to let you tell me. All right, so first, let's talk about the name a little bit. From the second that I heard your all's name, Robinhood,
right.
I mean, take from the rich, give to the poor, right? You're taking the $10 trade, and you're saying, hey, you don't have as much money, but you can still trade like everyone else. The name is extremely compelling and clever. But does it matter? Do you think that actually mattered? What's your take on that?
So my take is that it matters, in a kind of subtle sense, right? It matters in that, consumers tend to, as a consumer, right? Like the first time I hear about an app, I kind of, say, oh, that sounds cool, right? And then maybe the sixth or the seventh time, maybe then I willfully engage with the app, right? Like I downloaded QuizUp the other day because my roommate was bugging me about it. But then one of my other roommates before was bugging me about it. Then one of my colleagues was bugging me about it.
Multiple touch points.
And each time I was kind of like, well, all right, that sounds cool. And then, the sixth or seventh time I heard about QuizUp, I was finally like, all right, I'll download it, right?
Yeah.
So having a good name, makes it much easier, right, to achieve that sort of threshold, to cross that threshold.
Yeah. And for me, it made it easy to remember. I have a lot of people that come on this show, and a lot of times Sorry, there's somebody in the background.
Is there somebody? I see.
Yeah.
I see that person in the background as well.
I'm extremely distracted. Despite the fact that you're doing stock trades, you haven't lost the humor in the office place at least, so that's good. What I was going to say is a lot of times, I have companies on this show, and I'll book them, and then I'll hear their name later before the interview, and I'll be like, wait, what do they do again? Who are they? And I have to actually remember who they are, even though I've already booked them and already done research on them. Robinhood, I saw the homepage. I've never forgot the name. It stuck with me. I think it matters. It may not be the reason you have 300,000 signups, but it definitely hasn't hurt. I think it's definitely a part of the equation. Now, after the name, the first thing I look at on a website personally is the hook, kind of the main headline, the big words in bold that takes up most of the screen above the fold. What is your all's hook right now? What's it say?
0 commissions, essentially. We basically say, all right, what matters? What about Robinhood is it that matters to our customers? Mm-hmm. And it's worth, one thing that's really worthwhile doing is just sitting down for a little bit, sitting down with, people you work with and kind of thinking, what is it that we do that matters? Mm-hmm. Why are we doing, why do we exist? Why are we providing a valuable service? What is this service? Because if you can tell people what this service is, then that's part of the battle right there. Mm-hmm. Right? Then you've accurately described to people, here's this handshake agreement. You will pay attention to us, and in exchange, we will solve a problem for you.
Yeah. And I love that mentality because there's so many bad headlines you could have had. I mean, let me just give you a few that, you would expect from a company that doesn't really understand their customer. You could have said something in the big headline like, this is the future of stock trading. Nobody cares about the future of stock trading. Like, that's an irrelevant promise to me. Like, I don't know if your version of the future is the same as my version of the future. Right. I don't know what the future is. It's nebulous. It's vague. When you tell me $0 trading, I give you an email because that's what I want, So I just think that is such a great thing for people to understand that the main headline is extremely powerful. And when you create that main headline, tell them the main thing that you're alleviating. Don't be vague and overly clever. Just tell them what it is you're going to do for them. Like you said, what is the promise that you're going to uphold over time? Let me ask you, how important do you think that hook, that headline, has been to the 300,000 signups?
Extremely important. One thing that I found really interesting actually is there's a service called Peak, right? And you can use Peak to kind of see how people view your website. And I was looking through people using Peak, and I remember watching like a friend's video of like he submitted his website to Peak, his startup. He submitted it to Peak, and one of the users on Peak actually didn't know how to scroll down, right? And I remember he commented, that this website would be much better if it didn't involve so much scrolling, right? And that's one anecdote, right? Like, the plural of anecdote doesn't necessarily comprise, like a rigorous data set, but still, it just goes to show, that in some instances it's very worthwhile. In most instances, it's worthwhile keeping the most relevant and pertinent information above the fold, right? You never want to bury the lead.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. Don't bury the lead. It's what we learned with link baiting. If you want to write a blog post, make the title compelling. If you want to sell something on a website, make the headline compelling. Like, no one will get to your third feature bullet point down below the fold if the headline isn't perfect.
Inverted pyramid.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. The important stuff at the top, less important as you go down toward the point, right? Now, another thing you guys do is, I noticed that you put your investor logos on the bottom of the website. I've seen that a few times, but it's not the norm. You don't normally see in big logos, here's all of our investors. What was your thinking behind that? I got an idea, but why'd you guys put your investor logos there?
Well, brokerages are a very trust-based, business, right? Much more so than any other standard, average consumer startup. Mm-hmm. The brokerage business is very trust-based, right? And it makes sense because I wouldn't trust, an ordinary average company to steward my money properly, right? To take good care of it. And if something went wrong, I wouldn't trust like an unaccredited, like a normal business to, to take care of my money properly. Yeah. And, the thing is, each of these titans of a big, massive brokerage that's out right now, there were young ones too, right? There were new ones as well. Mm-hmm. And, we use these investor logos to signal that we're not like a fly-by-night operation that's going to, gobble up your Bitcoins, right?
Absolutely. And the reason I'm touching all these, points is because obviously your page is converting. I mean, you get 300,000 emails almost. whatever you're doing on that homepage, it is absolutely working. So I wanted to touch on some
Thanks
of
a
the
lot.
little things, that may have went into that to kind of, peek behind the scenes. Another thing is the video. The video is great. Is that the same guy that does videos for startups? I've seen him a few times, I think.
The sandwich videos.
Yeah, he's the one, man.
Yeah.
He also does the video for Coin, right? Is that him?
I believe so.
Yeah, every video he does, it just seems like their product is going to work.
He doesn't do videos for products that he doesn't believe in, I believe.
Yeah, I actually heard, maybe you can verify, I don't know. I've heard he actually takes equity sometimes for these videos because they're so good.
Really? I wouldn't be able to confirm or deny that, but I would not be surprised if that were the case, Bronson.
Now, that is a guy who's a baller. When you start making videos for startups and taking equity. So anyway, go to the Robinhood.com, watch the video, and then you'll see why they're good, because it's a fun video. Now, here's the part that I think a lot of our audience is really going to want to hear about. In a sense, I buried the lead, right? and that is the waiting list system. So you guys have some unique mechanics and some unique processes that went into your waiting list. Now walk me through it and do it in detail enough that we really get our head around it. What happens when somebody puts in their email on this site that really compels them to do other things?
Well, so when you put your email on the site, first it tells you your position in line, right? It tells you that there are a certain number of people in front of you, and since you've just signed up, there's nobody quite behind you in line yet. But you can check back to your position, and you can kind of see people accumulating behind you, but you can also see people coming in front of you, and that kind of gets to the heart of the metric, is that your position in the waiting list is essentially determined by two factors, right? The first factor is how many people you've referred onto the waiting list, and the second is how long you've been in line. So there's an inherent virality in the system where if you're really interested and excited about Robinhood, you tell your friends about it so that when we do start rolling out our product to people, from the wait list, then you get the product before everybody else, before other people.
You're giving them a unique link to send people to the homepage, so you're tracking which people they sent.
Right.
And are you giving them tools like, hey, here's the tweet button, here's where to put it on Google+? Are you kind of putting it for them on a platter so they just got to hit a few buttons? Or are you making them do the work of copying and pasting a link in all their places online?
Well, so, we have the option for Facebook, right, for them to kind of click a button and then it'll say, you can type in your message here and then share this, and share this with your friends on Facebook. And Facebook's actually where the bulk of our referrals come from.
Yeah.
So it's very good.
Yeah. Are you guys tracking, and you may or may not be, what amount of people are coming through a referral? I mean, is it like, hey, 50% are from a referral and 50% are just coming to the page through some other method? I mean, do you guys have those kind of numbers? Or
50-50 is quite close.
Is that it?
Yeah. Quite close.
So, I mean, you think about that. That's a big deal, this little loop, because without it, we're down to 150,000 signups, which is still incredible, but it is literally half of what you have, which, you work the funnel through time in the future. That's half the revenue you would have from that initial launch phase. So, I mean, it's a big deal the way you guys have done this referral loop.
And maybe it's fewer than 150,000, Bronson, because remember what I said earlier about, people signing up for apps and people kind of willfully engaging with products after they hear about it multiple times. I'm sure that there are many people from the wait list who have joined Robinhood, not because of the first person who referred them, but, because of the fifth or the 10th person who has referred them.
Especially if you're in a well-connected network that would be drawn to this product, you're going to hear about it from a couple people. Then when your whole little group is using it, you got a little mini movement. And so I can see how that can become very powerful. And I like the idea of knowing where you're at in the queue. So, because I've done the same launch method before with some of my products, but I didn't tell them where they were in the queue. I just said, you're going to be bumped up higher if you share. And it had great results for us. I think it would have been better if I'd done it your way and added another layer, which is, and here's where you're at in the queue. Because essentially you're telling them, here's the algorithm. It's based on when you signed up, and it's based on how many people you referred, and you can watch yourself rank in that algorithm higher and higher. And so I like that. If I do it again, I'm going to build that into it. That's a cool thing. Now, another thing you've done is you've kind of spaced out the product releases and the product kind of news. Tell me about that. What have you guys done there with the product itself to kind of drive interest and engagement? Well,
so there's two perspectives on that, right? One is like the data perspective, And the other is just the intuition perspective. And I'll talk a little bit about both.
Yeah.
I'll talk about, I guess, the data perspective first. It's you can look at successful product launches, releases, press releases, and unsuccessful press releases, and you can use classifiers, right, to determine what factors tend to correlate well with successful and unsuccessful ones. And one big factor that we found is that Tuesdays and Thursdays tend to be good days. That's like a fairly simple, actionable heuristic.
Yeah.
There are a lot of more complicated heuristics that you can't really act upon. So it's more of the simple, more actionable ones that are really more valuable, right? And that's sort of like how we approach that from a data perspective, and from an intuition perspective. It's basically, if you don't have anything worth sharing, there's really no need to share it.
Gotcha. So you wait till you have something meaningful, and then you push it out on a day when people will see it. And then just inherently, I mean, it's not a complicated strategy, but things don't have to be to work.
It's not a
give people meaning when they're able to look at it.
It's not a complicated strategy, but it's one that requires, a surprising amount of collective self-control. It's like when you're 5, right? You're in kindergarten. I draw a butterfly, and then I show it to my mom. And it's a terrible butterfly, but she's like, Daesun, that's beautiful, right? And she puts it up on the refrigerator, and You can have that mentality when you're 5, but you can't have that mentality if you want to grow. If you want to grow a startup.
No, I like that. That's great.
It's kind of incompatible,
Yeah, no, it totally is. Now you're getting a lot of signups from this wait list and the viral loop that you have built in there. But obviously, there's a chunk of signups that are not from that loop. You said it may be less than 150. So let's say it's 50,000 or 100,000. Still, there's a big chunk of people coming to your site that are not being referred by a friend. How are they learning about you? Do you have some kind of PR strategy? Are you getting the message out to bloggers? Are they coming from some other source? Where's that other pool of people finding you from?
Well, this goes back, sort of like the sort of messaging, right? To sort of making it extremely clear what the value proposition of your product is, right? And a lot of these people, find their way to us through secondary channels, through blogs, even through direct Google searches, right? Or through hearing about this, from friends in like a non-web setting, right? And if you don't have a product, right, if you don't have a very good way of messaging and basically saying this is why we're valuable, right? No matter how big your virality multiplier is, you still won't have, a very widely adopted product.
Yeah. No, that's great. Anything else you've done that has really been a conscious effort to drive growth? Is there something we haven't covered where your team made a decision, let's do this, it's going to add to the number of emails we end up getting?
Right. Well, actually, it's the growth strategy it's fairly simple. The growth strategies that we've adopted. I think there really aren't that many, true gotcha kind of, gimmicky strategies that we adopt, that we employ, or that we've, seen be particularly effective. I think the core of it, is building just a great product, and we anticipate that, when we release this product, it will be a fantastic product, and messaging it appropriately.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So
now there are things in the pipeline that I can't quite tell you about yet, and I assure you that at least one of them, maybe definitely not all of them, but anticipate that at least one of them will turn out very well.
Yeah, we have to come back on, maybe in a later episode.
Yeah, maybe in a later
after launch,
episode.
you've done some new strategies and you've seen which ones work. Well, then we'll have you guys back on. Now, we've talked about a number of the things you've done so far, because essentially, up to this point, what you've done is you created a product that has a great hook that has converted people on the website. And we've talked about some of those elements. It's a great name. You have a great hook to get them excited. You have a great video to introduce them to it. You have a great website that shows them the features and the benefits. And then you have a viral loop built into the email system itself. And then you got people finding you through other channels as well. So we've talked about kind of all those things. Which ones are the most important? Can you say that, yes, this one thing or these two things, that's the most important things, and everything else, we could still have won without those?
I think that it's probably the wait list that has been most important out of all these things from a growth perspective. I think that this is really sort of the core thing that kind of ties it all together. And it's really important having sort of like a core number also to kind of anchor yourself to. Like, what you make is what you measure, right? And having the wait list sort of tells us, this is how many people are interested in Robinhood, and then it gives us a number essentially to improve. You think of, over the course of a given day, you think of dozens, hundreds of different possible growth strategies. So let's like, what happens if we move this button, or what happens if we switch around these two slides in the sign up process, right? And then you ask yourself, we have finite engineering resources. I can only work, I like sleeping 7.5 hours a day. The commute is 30 minutes. There's only so much work I can do in a given day, right? And that's, you have to aggressively prioritize. And then having a wait list not only provides the on the surface viral benefits, but it's also good in a really sneaky way in that it lets what's important, and everything we do, we can ask ourselves, does it stand a chance of impacting this important number? If yes, then let's pursue it. If no, then let's think about pursuing something else.
Yeah, I like the focus on that metric because it's a good internal metric for you guys. Like you said, you can measure your success, week after week after it.
Right.
It's also a good metric for the user in terms of social proof because they see so many people are using it that, of course, they're with the right crowd because they're one of the mass that is finding value. And then it's also a good number for the gamification of getting people to share it. So kind of on 3 levels, it works for the social proof of the user, the gamification of the user, and the internal metric for you guys. And yet it's a simple one number that everybody's looking at. And honestly, it's the one number that got you guys this interview. As I was emailing back and forth with you guys, I have to vet people. And I say, okay, well, how many signups do you have? And when you respond back that, it's almost 300K, I'm like, yeah, when you want to come on. I mean, it's like that's an indicator. It's a shorthand way for me and everyone else to know that what you're doing is working. There's no marketing speak. There's no cleverly disguised failure. It's just that's the number. It is what it is. So I like that there's a real focus on that. Now, given everything you guys have
experienced, a lot easier too.
Yeah, go ahead. What's that?
Makes my job a lot easier as well. Right? Instead of having to think of fanciful ways of phrasing things, I can kind of put my head down and think, all right, how do I get this? How do I make this work?
Absolutely. You just put that number out and there you go. Done. That's where we're at. Now, seeing kind of the growth of the company in terms of, getting over all the hurdles of being to the point that you can make trades, and then also having this waiting list and building it, what has surprised you about the growth process of Robinhood? Has anything occurred or happened or taken place that really wasn't what you expected maybe?
Positive feedback is probably one thing that I hadn't particularly expected. There's been a lot of actual positive feedback, to the Robinhood, to the Robinhood app, just friends, family, and strangers, reaching out and saying, this is something really interesting that you guys are working on. And, it's very validating on 2 fronts, right? It's very validating from an engineering perspective, and that, wow, there's something that I'm working on that I'm kind of, putting quite a bit of time and effort into, and it's, it's quite rewarding. And it's also very, very rewarding from a growth standpoint as well, right? Because, you take your mission, right, which is increasing, at the end of the day, it's increasing the number of people who use the app. And it's a much more powerful thing to say, the higher this number goes, the more difference I'm making. That's a much more powerful statement than the higher this number goes, the bigger the company valuation will be, or the bigger my equity stake will be, right? That's inherently a much more powerful thing to do. So that's one thing that's definitely, surprised me the most about this whole process. In a very good way, too.
That's great. Now, it's good to be surprised by positive feedback. That's some entrepreneurs are surprised by negative feedback, so you're in a good situation. That's awesome.
Yeah. Negative feedback, I think, is never particular. You read any comment thread and...
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing people have to realize is, enjoy the good comments that people have for you. And there's always going to be negative because everyone is not your market. So when somebody does have negative, just get over it and move on. They're not your market. You're not going after them anyway. It doesn't matter. Now, obviously, there's some customer development where you got to take feedback sometimes in some ways, but you can't get caught up on the negative. But it is good that you guys are having so much positive. So now you have this huge waiting list, almost 300,000 people waiting to get in. Are you guys going to pick a day and let them all in? Are you going to stagger the release, let a few in here, and then kind of up the number over time? What's your strategy there, or is there no strategy there?
The engineering team will kill me, if if I say, if I were to intimate, if I were to imply by any way that we were to, let them all in at once. Absolutely not, Bronson. There's a trade-off between releasing the best product that you can and releasing the biggest, releasing the product to as many people as you can.
Yeah.
And, just technical implementation standpoint, having an infrastructure that can support several people is extremely different from an infrastructure that can support, several orders of magnitude more people.
Yeah.
And the way you scale upwards is different for each company. So that's why we're going to gradually let people in at a rate that, allows us to say with confidence, we're gonna release the best product that we can release. Anything else would be a failure to our customers of a much higher order than rolling out the product too slowly.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, right, one currency that we have that you can't get back is trust.
That's exactly what I was getting ready to say. It goes back to, the trust you're trying to put forward on the front of the website. Having a stock trading app that is glitchy is a really big deal. Having a Facebook app that's glitchy is not a big deal. So you got to know what space you're in and how fast you can roll things out.
Right.
No, that's great. So kind of given everything we talked about, this is the last question that I asked everyone that I have on the show.
Yeah, of course.
What's the best advice you have for any startup that's trying to grow?
It's a tough question. That's I saw the list of questions that you gave, and that's the one that
that's what everybody gets hung up on.
Yeah. Well, I'm not stuck on it. It's just the most difficult one, I would say. And I think there's a nice answer to that one, and it's a nice concise one too. And it's always play devil's advocate.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
And when you're by yourself, right? When you're thinking of a strategy to implement, you can think about how can I change this strategy, right? How can I take the logical opposite of the strategy, and what happens if I try to implement that? Or when you're in a meeting with people, when you're talking with people about strategy, you can be like, just to play devil's advocate, what if we do the exact opposite of this, right? And the phrase "just to play devil's advocate" is a nice one because it kind of absolves you of any personal responsibility. Right? It's not me. It's I'm just playing devil's advocate, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very good way. It's a very useful phrase, and it's a very defensive phrase, and it's also a very good way to think about problems, genuinely in an outside the box manner.
Yeah, we get so stuck thinking the way we think that we just have to change gears and be like, all right, what if we did the opposite? What if we did something totally different? What if we, didn't do that, even though everybody else says we should? Because that's one of the things I've seen in great entrepreneurs. They're not afraid to have bad ideas, and they're not afraid to bring up things even when you're not supposed to, or even when it's not the thing that is known general knowledge that everyone's agreeing with. Right. Great entrepreneurs, they put things out there. They're not afraid of their own thoughts, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And they don't surround themselves by yes men, because 95% of the time when you play devil's advocate, you're throwing out a legitimately bad idea.
Yeah,
and it's very hard to pick the good from the bad. And you need, talented people around you. And I can, fully attest that everybody I work with at Robinhood, is extremely, extremely talented and extremely hardworking. It's been a pleasure working with all these people as well.
I don't know if you've seen this, but this is a part of my own experience, is that, the smarter people are and the better they are, the more bad ideas they allow to go through their mind every day. And the more bad ideas they're allowed to say out loud, because it's cycling through all those bad ideas. And if you're honest and you have colleagues that can really help you whittle them down to the good ones, you end up in a really great place because your amount of ideas is just so greater at the top of the funnel, and then as you narrow it down. So that's been my experience anyway, is great people have tons of bad ideas, and mediocre people don't allow themselves to think very long and hard about things that aren't already known to work.
And I think we try extremely hard to cultivate such a culture, at Robinhood. It's it's interesting, and I really like the way you phrased that, because having bad ideas is an extremely natural part of this process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great interview. I mean, I've learned a lot. I've
My
learned a lot
pleasure.
by watching you guys grow. It's been fun. So Daesun, just thanks again for coming on Growth Hacker TV.
Thank you, Bronson.